We had stopped at page 431. Sri Aurobindo says at one of the places in one of his aphorisms that the purpose of art is to reveal what nature hides. Because if it is to reproduce exactly the same thing, then it doesn't make sense. It is there already. And poetry is one of the most sublime forms of art. It has been used right from the age of the Vedic mystics down to our age to express that which is hidden, the hidden side of existence. The mystics have used it because it lends itself to that. And along with that, the beauty of poetry is that it lends itself to many suggestions. As we know how Vedic mystics use the word cow to mean also light, go for light, Ashwa for power, Ashwapati, Dyumatsena. So, but in poetry it's much more possible. So when people read about Satyavan, we just read, and about Savitri, it looks like, do such beings really exist? Well, maybe they are hidden by nature behind the covering of our ordinary humanity, and nature strives and struggles to give birth to this idealized humanity. And that is the whole purpose. And Sri Aurobindo at one place says that Indians loved extremes because, they loved this aspect of superhumanity, something which we don't normally find. So look at Satyavan's description, combination of strength and tenderness and sweetness. On one side, he is soft as a bud. On another side, his strength is like a tower built to heaven. There is in him a calm, like the quiet sea. But also, there is the coming into him, rushing into him, of strong vital currents, but they are so beautifully disciplined, like a forest grove in which they come and find a nest. It's amazing the way Sri Aurobindo describes the character of Satyavan. He is wise, he is the secret Veda knower, and when one reads through his character, it's simply wonderful. I mean, this is the kind of, if leave aside the supramental, which is of course yet to come, but even if humanity could be half this much, it would be wonderful. So we have a question which is raised about the Gita, that why was it given to Arjuna? Gita at one level is given to all of us, but Arjuna was the ideal disciple to receive it. So similarly, while the mother's grace is on all, but how beautiful if one could, by grace and by a process of long working of nature, arrive at this kind of a front that Satyavan represents. It's a marvel, meeting point of heaven and earth. So this is one aspect in what we read. But along with that, there is another aspect. And Sri Aurobindo beautifully suggests to us right now, and that also sets the note for the theme of this poem, Conquering Over Death, why conquest over physical death is really important. Very often we read all these beautiful things, such human beings, and we wonder that why can't, we be like them. The problem at its bottom lies in matter. This queen will say, this fragile vase cannot hold that flame. This is a big problem. We may not give any importance to this problem, but the Lord knows that the moment even a being of a very great height enters into this bodily stuff, Mother says it's like being stunned into unconsciousness. And one has to struggle to emerge. And even then, matter ties, clamps from every side. And it takes long before one can even become a little aware that inside this vase there is something which is beautiful. Antaha sharire jyotirmayo hi shubhro. It takes such a long time. So this is the problem. So he states this problem so beautifully that Satyavan is a most beautiful person. You cannot find his like, he tells the queen, Narada tells the queen. But there is only one problem. This day returning, Satyavan must die. Now the interesting part is that it doesn't say why Satyavan must die, but it is suggested already. It's not because of bad karmas. It's not because of something else. Because this vase cannot hold. This is a big problem. Sri Aurobindo speaks about it at length towards his later writings, the supramental manifestation. He says the problem of supramental transformation is dual, corporeal and psychological. So psychological part we understand that we have to work inside, etc. But corporeal, the very physical matter. So he says that this vase, one wishes it could hold, but the elements are still subject to death, and death will creep inside, and this day is returning Satyavan must die. There is second interesting part from a purely poetic and dramatic point of view, that there is in it a irony. Now it's, as they say, that it's a difficult thing to create irony. Now here we all know that Satyavan will survive. We all know it. But none of the characters knows. This is the beauty, that he is creating such a live image in front of us. We know, because we have read the story, that Satyavan is eventually going to come out. But at this point of time, Queen doesn't know, Ashwapati is maybe, may not be, and Narada himself, and this is the third interesting part, who has prophesied, doesn't know that there is something beyond the prophecy. This very interesting aspect about foresight. Mother speaks of it. Foresight can tell us about things up to a point, once they have entered into the cosmic play. But there is a power beyond the cosmos which can intervene and change the course of things. And that's what Savitri is about. She comes to bring that power. But once it enters into the cosmic play, it goes through its full cycle. So, apart from that, it will happen. So, Narada has prophesied. Now, as far as I know, there are so many places Narada has prophesied. And this is the first place where it seems that Narada's prophecy actually, in a certain sense, went wrong, or it went half right. He died and yet he survived. So it's another very interesting aspect, that this day returning Satyavan must die. A lightning, bright and nude, this sentence fell. It's like suddenly, like lightning strikes a tree and burns it down, or strikes the earth. Suddenly, they are all wondering what has happened. He is saying such beautiful things. But in the last 4 lines he summarizes, "Oh loss, if death could creep into its elements, it will be such a great loss." And he has said that this day returning, Satyavan must die. But the queen cried, and now this is the human consciousness, the way it responds to the ways of fate, because we don't understand. So it responds exactly the way queen responds. "Vain then can be heaven's grace." That you are saying that he is a very fine boy, wonderful man, such a sample that it is heaven which has lent him to earth. What is the use? Vain. Heaven mocks us with the brilliance of its gifts, for death is a cup bearer of the wine. So gift is given, but through whom? The hands, through death, because death has to bring it into this realm. Take this wine, this rarest of rare, somras, take it to humanity. But death is taking it. So death is going to probably drink it halfway through and give us only a few drops of that wonderful draught. Of too brief joy held up to mortal lips for a passionate moment by the careless gods. But I reject the grace and the mockery. Now you see, this full passage is full of an irony. Because we know that if she rejects this moment, she will also reject something which is going to be, something which is going to be not only an inspiration but a work for the future. So there is a choice given to her, and she says, I reject. Mounting thy car, go forth, O Savitri, and travel once more through the peopled lands. Alas, in the green gladness of the woods, thy heart has stooped to a misleading call. This is exactly what we would tell our children if we feel that they have made a choice which will not bring them happiness. Basically, it amounts to that. So we'll say, Ki, you have made a wrong choice, and go back. Choose once again and leave this fated head. Death is the gardener of this wonder tree. Love's sweetness sleeps in his pale marble hand, advancing in a honeyed line but closed. A little joy would buy too bitter an end. This is precisely the way we tell, And Sri Aurobindo says at one place, it is better to make a mistake while following the heart than to be right following the calculating mind. It's better to make a mistake. Why? Because it's something else opens through that, an evolutionary process which we don't understand. Plead not thy choice, for death has made it vain. Thy youth and radiance were not born to die, a casket void dropped on a careless soil. A choice less rare may call a happier fate. This is where Sri Aurobindo contrasts the ordinary human thought and the thought of those who are born for greatness. Ordinary human thought seeks happiness. So if happiness is not there, it's the prime thing. And that's how people, when they hold a statistical survey, they will say, what most people want is happiness. That is how the lure of the apparent ways. So if happiness is not going to come, we should not accept it. But those who are made of a rare stuff like Savitri, they don't choose happiness. They choose strength. They choose truth. They choose love, even if happiness has to be sacrificed. This is the difference between beings of a rare make and the common lot. And now what Savitri says, it reminds me of, we make so much fuss about Bhishma Pratigya. And we say that, Bhishma did a great Pratigya. I think we should now change it to say Savitri's Pratigya. Because Bhishma Pratigya was for his father's sake and there was nothing much. Okay, he was losing his kingdom. But Bhishma still remained the grand guardian. He was the boss. He played behind the scene. He knew that doesn't matter. Whether even if I don't have the throne, I will be the boss. After all, without Bhishma, who can imagine the Kuru clan? So he was the man behind the scene. He still had the power. And he had sacrificed the throne. And we say, what a pratigya that he will never marry. Now you see the paradox. Savitri says, I will marry. Just the opposite. And I am going to marry this man who is destined to die. Come what may. So this is a new symbol, icon of pratigya, where she risks her happiness, risks being widowed, and whatever else that comes with it. But Savitri answered from her violent heart. This is not ordinary violence. The mother says that, in fact, in Savitri, when Sri Aurobindo introduces Savitri in the very beginning, he says, in her there was the anguish of the gods. They are not happy with smallness, littleness, the way life is, and they want to shatter these molds and create something new. That's why when we read some of Swami Vivekananda's letters, people had to tell him that you are scolding so much, who will listen to you? They will all run away. And he says, what to do? I can't tolerate this, I can't accept it. So normally we have an image of a very pacifistic saintliness. But there are hearts that come from a greater sphere and they cannot accept smallness. They cannot accept, littleness or a kind of ugly compromise that we make, even with fate. So she has a violent heart. Her voice was calm. Her face was fixed like steel. This is Savitri's pratigya. Once my heart chose and chooses not again. This is now the example of the future. Bhishma has gone on his bed of arrows. But Savitri conquers death. Something much more amazing. The word I have spoken can never be erased. It is written in the record book of God. This is how ancient Indian thought created the idea of a superhuman. Look at King Harishchandra. He, in his dream, gives away the kingdom to sage Vishwamitra. And next day the sage comes and says, do you remember? Yes, come, I am waiting for you. Sit on the throne. What kind of humanity that has been envisaged? Or Rama to respect the wish of his father because he had promised. So to honor that promise, walks out 14 years. Compared to today's times when we stick to the throne, to power, to position, as if the world would not run if we were not there. So look at Savitri, she says, once my heart has chosen, it is written in the record book of God. That the truth once uttered from the earth's air effaced, by mind forgotten, sounds immortally, forever in the memory of time. It's not a question of that, I don't keep my promise. It is there. This promise will haunt me. This is going to come back. It is something which I have uttered in a sacred moment. And this cannot be taken lightly. Once the dice fall thrown by the hand of fate, in an eternal moment of the gods. So here also we see, again, what superhuman characters, even in Mahabharata. When Yudhishthir loses, it's very obvious that these people have cheated and gone overboard. He could have fought. Oh, you have cheated. How dare you? It's my right. He doesn't do that. He accepts. He has accepted. This is the difference between a godlike humanity and a asuric humanity, which is always thinking of its benefit, calculation, happiness, etc. But a godlike humanity aspires for truth, for light, for the strength that comes from truth. My heart has sealed its troth to Satyavan. Troth, faith. Even it's used archaically for truth. My heart has sealed. I mean, they had a Gandharv Vivah. There was no invitation card also. No time for that. Wonderful marriage. In the marriage of that auspicious hour. No Pandit. Sri Aurobindo has broken all norms. They get married without consulting horoscopes. They get married without a Pandit, without the sacred mantras. The winds create the mantra. And the sun becomes the witness, the fire, the deity. And how they get married? They pick up some flowers. Hastily she picks up, ties them into a little garland and puts. No donkey riding on a horse. Nothing like that. No talwar and pagdi, nothing. It's a forest. They have decided, chosen, and that's the end of it. So look at the beauty, the grace, the greatness, the might of a civilization which could think like this, conceive like this. Its signature adverse fate cannot efface. We have signed. Where? Not in the registrar's office. It's not a legal document. Our hearts have signed to each other in the bond of love. If adverse fate has to come, we will see. Face it together. Its seal, not fate, nor death, nor time dissolve. Those who shall part, who have grown one being within. It's not about just an external ritual. How we today conceive marriage and how Sri Aurobindo is revealing to us the deeper truth. There is a small one-liner of Mother, many such beautiful one-liners. She says, love is the only legitimate bond of union. Now, look at these words. She doesn't say that, outwardly, whether one got married and there was a custom, there was a love. And that's what we see in Towards the Future. She says the same thing to her husband. That look, you have love for her, that's it. Love is the only. If there is no more love, the union dissolves. How deep and inner truths that are being revealed to us. That we have grown one being within. You can't part us now. If it was only something external, maybe. But say inner truth. Death's grip can break our bodies, not our souls. If death take him, I too know how to die. It's tremendous. And perhaps this was the origin originally of what later degenerated into something very gross, crude and ugly. the ideal of Sati, who by the power of a truth, manifesting as love for one object, her husband in this case, could conquer death, could change things. This was the tremendous power of love, a potential that we don't know how to tap. Actually, we don't even know such a potential exists. One of the biggest problem of today's times is that we have everything except love. It's not taught in the classroom, school. We are at home. We are taught how to calculate for future and how to choose based on benefit, advantage. All these things are taught. But love is an energy which remains suppressed. So it takes very crude forms because it has never been brought out. So it takes very, very crude forms, totally governed by the calculating mind, etc. But look, here is such a love that she says, if he dies, what is there? I have grown one being with him within. I too can die. There are such stories like that in Indian thought. Tulsi, when her husband dies, she says, fine, I also give my body, and she dies. But before dying, she curses Lord Vishnu. You have caused his death, and therefore I curse you that you too will suffer. And he says, this I have to accept because I know that you are a woman who has truly loved. So even the gods tremble before such a love. So she says, I too know how to die. Let fate do with me what she will or can. I am stronger than death and greater than my fate. My love shall outlast the world. Doom falls from me, helpless against my immortality. And no wonder that so many love stories, which are picturized and they go away. Look at the love story of Savitri and Satyavan. We don't even know when it happened. In Mahabharata, this is narrated as a tale which took place long back. So, Vedic cycle, maybe 10,000 plus years back, with no print, no media, no television to serialize, and the story is alive. It's alive in the human heart, inspiring us for that kind of love. Fate's law may change, but not my spirit's will. This is the stuff that makes a human being superhuman. This capacity, this conviction. When mother says that there are two things which will be which will be the hallmark of a superhumanity. And one of them is the absolute conviction of truth. And we see it here. Absolute conviction. This cannot be said by any ordinary mortal or in an ordinary state of consciousness. Fate can change, but not my spirit's will. An adamant will, she cast her speech like bronze. This is a great quality which we don't like in our children. Being adamant. But mother says it's a great quality if it can turn in the right direction. If it can find direction, it's a tremendous quality. To be adamant, to refuse to concede, not to listen. It can take strange forms. But actually, if it's a virtue which has taken a paradoxically form which is not, convenient. But when we look back, all these beings, mother had a tremendous will. And she was not governed by all these social notions. How when the monitor, she had troubled some children in her class, they would come to her for all problems. She was the Sphinx, as they called her. So they said, monitor has kept the key and, she is going to turn one child out like that. Child means maybe 14, 15. So the mother said, come. She goes to the monitress. She held her hand tightly and said, are you going to change your decision or not? Nothing. No explanations, no logic. And she was so scared because she must have felt some other force. So she says, yes, immediately, without any fuss. What a tremendous power that is. And in normal course, we would punish such a child. But these children who revolt very often have something in them which is very different. In one of her later writings in the Agenda Conversations, the mother says, Everywhere I see revolt, revolt, revolt. And then she says, the fact that people are revolting against the social norms and notions is a sign that they are ready for something new. It's there in her words. And we should take them and help them build a higher harmony. Of course, she's not talking of revolt against the divine, which is there two different things. Revolt against the forms of society, the way it is organized today. She says it's a sign that one is ready for something new, because the old consciousness has to go and all that it has built. But in the queen's mind, listening her words rang like the voice of a self-chosen doom, denying every issue of escape. She doesn't like it. No mother likes, no father likes. If child doesn't listen, that too when it's an obviously wrong choice. Look how Sri Aurobindo is playing as a master artist. He's shaking all our notions, just like thoughts and aphorisms. When Sri Aurobindo wrote Thoughts and Aphorisms, so mother says, he wrote all this to shake away everybody's social, moral and these notions. And they didn't understand. So he says that many of the youngsters didn't understand what Sri Aurobindo is writing. Some of his aphorisms are totally, they break open the mind and open to a new light. They challenge, they break the limits. So here is Savitri challenging the limits. It's all right to read it. Imagine a scenario where our own child is involved. How many of us would say, oh yes, Savitri is written? We'll say, that is only to Savitri. Don't behave like that. You are ordinary person, behave like an ordinary person, you are making a stupid choice. But look to what extent. At one place when somebody asked mother, if you love somebody and have faith in the person, what if the person deceives you? So mother gave a very startling reply. She says it means that your faith and love was not strong enough. It's when you read it, it's strange, because normally we would say, well, this is what life is. That's what Queen is going to say. But it means that there is a power within us which can change things even outside. And that power has to be tapped. But Queen looks at it differently. And these 4 lines are such subtle psychology. To her own despair, answer the mother maid, as one she cried, who in her heavy heart labors amid the sobbing of her hopes to wake a note of help from sadder strings. Now, this is again a very amazing line. It's like, what do we do when, something like this happens where we feel child has made a wrong choice according to our conceptions. So what do we say when we talk to others? What to do? This is what life is. World is like this, so bad. Everybody is bad. Now you see what we are doing is, we are finding a response from sadder strings. And the other person will say, yes, I know. My child also did the same thing. So and so's child also did the same thing. Evoking a response, because it gives a kind of comfort. Comfort that this is the nature of earth life. We can't help it. Only like a master, really, she is basically entering into what is called as Shamshan Vairagya. Because in her own life, she is facing a critical moment. She is suddenly feeling that this is how life is upon earth. So Sri Aurobindo brings a background of this Shamshan Vairagya. As one to her own despair answered the mother maid, as one she cried who in her heavy heart labors amid the sobbing of her hopes to wake a note of help from sadder strings. So when one is overcome by grief, one starts seeing this whole world colored with grief. And in Indian thought, it's called Shamshan Vairagya. What is there? Everybody dies. When somebody died, it gives comfort, but a strange comfort. If everybody dies, that doesn't really reduce the sorrow of one's own problem. But this is how we seek comfort. O child, in the magnificence of thy soul, dwelling on the border of a greater world, and dazzled by thy superhuman thoughts, thou lendest eternity to a mortal hope. She says, I know you have a tendency to be idealistic, but you don't know what real life out here is. You are dreaming beautiful things because in your consciousness you live on the borders. But this is real life. So, what is real life? Here, on this mutable and ignorant earth, who is the lover and who is the friend? Now, this is a typical dialogue. All Mayavadis would be very happy. And sometimes we may put it as a quote, saying Sri Aurobindo says this. Here, on the mutable and ignorant earth, who is the lover and who is the friend? All passes here, nothing remains the same. Typical Mayavadin. That this is the world. Everything is born, then dies, then comes again, then born and dies. Punarapi janani jatare shenam, punarapi janmam, punarapi maranam. Everything is just passing fancy. Must have read Shankaracharya. None is for any on this transient globe. Ekoham, Shivoham, Shivoham. None is for anybody. What is all this talk about love? He whom thou lovest now, a stranger came, and into a far strangeness shall depart. You know, few days back, you didn't even know him, and your life was so happy. And after some time, he will again go away. Why are you doing this foolish thing? Now see, it is strange. It is shaking our minds from all our conventional idea of spiritual life and understanding of earth and creation and everything else. None is for any on this transient globe. He whom thou lovest now, a stranger came, and into a far strangeness shall depart. His moments part once done upon life's stage, which for a time was given him from within. To other scenes he moves and other players, and laughs and weeps mid faces new, unknown. Today he is saying that he loves you, but after 1 year he will die, then after a few more months he'll be reborn, some new faces where he will laugh, he'll forget you. You will only carry the sorrow in your heart. So make choices based on practical things. Now, there is a truth in it, but not the total truth. Just as when death speaks, Savitri answers to him, O death, thou speakest truth, but the truth that slays. Now hear from me the truth that saves. So the truth that saves is that everything can be uplifted to its divine possibility. And that's what in Indian thought we see again and again brought out. And in Savitri it's one way. Like Sri Aurobindo says in the chapter on renunciation in the synthesis of yoga. He says we have weird ideas about renunciation. So we believe we leave things outwardly and we are great renunciates. So he says if that be true, then Rama, when he lost his wife to Ravana, should have said, it's very nice. Who is the wife? Who is the husband? Shivoham, Shivoham, Sachidanandham. And suddenly realized that he is actually the divine. And it was a forest, wonderful place. There were many hermitages. And just taken it that this is fate. What is this love? Who is Sita after all? One formation. There are many. She would move on. He doesn't do that. Rama, the renunciate, who could renounce his kingdom and later even renounce Sita. And such a paradox. Yet Rama marches with an army of monkeys, risking his own life to free her from the clutches of the demon king. That's not her place. He has to do it. That is dharma. But when she goes to the Rishi's hermitage, that is a different story altogether. That is a Raj Dharma and Dharma of that time. And of course the deeper symbol of earth nature and divine soul not coming together. But here, he must rescue her from that clutches. This is not how Janki's fate should be. So as a perfect renunciate, he marches on to Lanka. This is renunciation. Or to Arjuna, when Krishna tells him, fight this great battle and take the Rajyam Samriddham. So here also, Queen is trying to call on all the illusionist theory to make her daughter change her mind. The body thou hast loved is cast away amidst the brute unchanging stuff of worlds to indifferent mighty nature, and becomes crude matter for the joy of others' lives. This he says, see, when he dies, when people die, their bodies will be eaten up by ants. Who will rejoice? Crude matter for these others' joy. And you are feeling love. What is love? It's just a brief emotion. But for our souls upon the wheel of God, forever turning, they arrive and go. Now she is speaking of something which will sound like a very high philosophy. Married and sundered in the magic round of the great dancer of the boundless dance, our emotions are but high and dying notes of his wild music changed compellingly. Almost one feels that something similar death will speak later on. He says, look, there is no other person. Soul is traveling alone. There are good experiences, bad experiences, relationships. You come together, you part, etc., etc. You become rich, you become poor. And through all this, your emotion changes. So right now you are happy, then you will be sad. After 3-4 years, you will find somebody else, you will again be happy. And Satyavan will forget you. So she is saying that, look, this is the reality of life. By the passionate movements of a seeking heart, in the inconstant links of hour with hour, to call down heaven's distant answering song, to cry to an unceased bliss, is all we dare. So momentarily, yes, it's nice. I'm saying it's nothing wrong. You felt love for him, very good. For a moment you call down heaven's song. But don't think it is going to last. It is not permanent. It will go away. All that we can think of is distant bliss for a brief moment. We are humans, mortals, and we have to live within limits. That's how death will tell Savitri. Mortal, go back to thy world. You cannot cross. This is not a realm for you. And this we see in Sri Aurobindo's many poems. Ruru. We see this in even Ilion. How, death and the victory over death. We see the same thing in Ulupi. How she sacrifices and yet knows that this love is something so several aspects and dimensions of love which can be raised to an immortal level. Once seized, we lose the heavenly music sense. So now, she is bringing another practical truth. That right now you are saying all this. We understand. It happens. It happened when we were also 16, 17. But you know what? When you get married, you will realize Aate dal ka bhav. All this will go away. So he says, once seized. What is seized? The object of your love. Once seized. We lose the heavenly music sense. Too near, the rhythmic cry has fled or failed. Death will also tell her same thing. He'll say, I am rescuing you. He tells Savitri, if Satyavan would have lived, love would have died. But because he has died, love, you will have sweet memories of him, because 1 year means you don't fight much. That will start later on. So he says, you know what, Savitri, you don't realize. You are doing a foolish choice. I know, I understand, it's a beautiful emotion. But real life is different. When you actually get married, you will realize the problems. Our joys are perfumes. Oh, all sweetnesses are baffling symbols here. Love dies before the lover in our breast. It's a sad truth, but a truth that slays. Love dies before the lover. The lover is there, someone whom one loved, and love has died. So what should Savitri do? She has a choice, either to accept this sad philosophy or take the challenge that no, let there be a new law created upon earth. Our joys are perfumes in a brittle vase. What? Only the Lord can think like this. To use the word think is, joys are like perfumes. which evaporate in a brittle vase. Vase is fragile and the joy evaporates. Love dies before the lover in our breast. Our joys are perfumes in a brittle vase. Oh, then what wreck is this upon time's sea? To spread life sails to the hurricane desire and call for pilot the unseeing heart. So she says, you are being driven by desire and your heart cannot see, blindly by the heart. Think rationally, think logically. You have been given logic. So you should have asked him, where are you? You are in a forest. You should have seen. Then still you could have asked him, does he have a passport and visa of America? What is his salary structure? What is his education? You have seen nothing. Just you feel that there is love in your heart and that's the end of things. So, Queen is telling Savitri, you have made a wrong choice. Desire is driving you. O child, wilt thou proclaim, wilt thou then follow against the law? That is the eternal will. The autarky of the rash Titan's mood. Now she has gone overboard. She says, Titans do like that. No, I will follow my will. And they pit themselves against the law. Now you see how scriptures are like walking on a double-edged sword. It is true, Titans do like that, self-will, but they do it for the sake of ego. Now that Sri Aurobindo will say later on. But here that's not the case, because actually if she was doing it for the ego, she should have rejected this choice. She is doing it for something else, for manifesting a divine possibility upon earth. So she says, you are being overtaken by Titan's mood, autarky. He wants to live by his own will. He says, I am right, nobody else. I want to do this, I will do it. And he strives against the law with a capital L, the law that God has given upon earth. What is God's law? She is saying that everything on earth will come and go, it will vanish and fade away. The only thing that will remain is Ram Naam Satya Hai. So you should forget all else. And the paradox is, Rama, whose name we say Ram Naam Satya Hai, is himself an icon of sublime love. It is a paradox. Who could take on Ravana for the sake of the beloved? And yet we have turned even his name into a very negative kind of thing. Ultimately, everything vanishes. The autarky of the rash Titan's mood, to whom his own fears will, is the one law in a world where truth is not, nor light, nor God. God is there in Brahman consciousness, truth is there, light is there. Here there is a play of deception. Here there is a play of falsehood. Now all these things are true at a level. The queen is a sattvic lady, and yet they are not the total truth. And this is what Sri Aurobindo's beauty is, that he brings different perspectives of truth. And either he reconciles them or brings a greater thing which fulfills them. So it's not that this is not true. At one level it is true. But there is a greater possibility, and that's what Savitri will manifest. A few more lines and then we stop. Only the gods can speak what now thou speakest. So she's saying that don't say such things. You're not a god, It's like once there was a meeting on Govardhan Parvat, and Durvasa Rishi came and he was making prophecies like Narada. And they asked him only one question. Tell me when Kansa's kingdom will collapse. His taxation is very high and he's just not bothered. So Durvasa looks, baby Krishna is also there. So he looks into his eyes and says, shall I tell your secret to them? So Krishna says, you say whatever you want to say. Their understanding is my control. They will understand what I want them to understand. So Durvasa says, when a little baby will lift this mountain on his little finger, that time you should know that Kansa's reign is going to end. He goes away. Now, there are different groups which form. So they are the materialists. They say what he meant to say is it's impossible. Because how can a baby lift? Like we say, supramental, all this is fine, but it's impossible. Look at human nature. Materialist, gross materialist. Then there were others who were otherworldly philosophies. In heaven you can do it. So what he meant was, when you go to heaven, then you will have your fill. You will beat Kansa black and blue. But here, don't expect this change. And there is one child, he tells his mother, Mom, I am not going to school tomorrow. Why? Give me more makhan and I'll do more exercise. What do you mean? He said, no, one child, maybe I am that child, you never know. Now, well, we may laugh and frown, but look, an ideal. At least this child is aspiring. So this is the beauty of this thought, that there is a greater possibility which we don't even entertain because the physical mind says it's just not possible. And mother, in agenda we see, she was struggling with these suggestions from all sides. Death is inevitable. Death is going to be there. She says, my cells are invaded by that. All around these suggestions come. It's not possible, not possible. She says, only the gods can speak what thou speakest. Thou who art human, think not like a god. So it's going to be very dangerous when gods will come upon earth and they start taking up human life. For parents, it's going to be a terrible time. And I think mother has said that, at least to Udarda's note is there. When he read out to the mother, I saw the omnipotent's flaming pioneers. So mother said, these children are coming down since the supramental descent. More and more they are of these kind of coming out down. And then she says, but it will be very difficult to bring up these children. The massive barrier breakers, wrestlers with destiny in her list of will. And they are not going to listen to any authority. They are born to break boundaries and be very, very difficult, even after reading Savitri and seeing all this. So Queen is saying, Savitri, you can do it in your heaven from where you have come. Here you are a human being. Don't behave like the gods. So we'll take a break for 10 minutes and see what else the mother has to say. Queen and Savitri's reply.